this beginner tutorial for game development in Unreal Engine. Today we will be talking about saving and loading games. So let's get into it. So here we are in Unreal Engine. We're using version 4.26 if you want to follow along today. And today we will be talking about save game. Now, what we have done here before this is just we're using a first person template, and I'm using a character that I've done in earlier tutorials, but it's basically just a first person character child I made here, and it is a separate map so we can play around in it. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a simple system for saving and loading some information. Now, we have learned earlier about how you can use your game instance to have data persistent through different levels, but something that you also need at some points is the ability to have data persistent through different game sessions, and that is where save game comes in. It's an ability to allow you to save information, and what that information is completely up to you. You can save as much or as little as you want, and have that information available for you to load at a different opportunity. So let's demonstrate this. So the very first thing that we need to create is a class for this save game. So what we do is we right click and go to blueprint class, and then we can type in save, and they'll find a save game option here, and click select. We'll name this BP for blueprint underscore save game. Now this is our container or holder of information that we want to have persistent through game sessions. So this is mainly the part that we're using, the parts where we have variables here. Now in this particular instance, what we're going to be doing is we're going to have a position, player position, and we're going to make it a vector. So we're going to be saving our location at some point. And that's all good and fine. So that's what that is for, right? Close down the project settings, and then we'll open up our character. Now our character here is going to have some functionality to actually trigger saving, loading, so we can see that it actually functions. So to do that, we're going to start off with creating a few events to start off with. So if you just type in custom events, we're going to create an event called create save game. We're going to make another event called custom event load save game, and the third event, and we can call that one save game, like so. And that is all that we need for now. Let us quickly rename this in case we have someone that has OCD and is disturbed by not having a proper capitalization. Anyway, so these are going to represent our different events that we're going to be doing. So first off, what we want to do is we want to have some kind of input saying that, okay, we're going to save the game. So let's just create a key for F and a key for R. Now these are just going to represent our events for when we load or when we save. These could just as easily be put into widgets in a user interface, or to have a blueprint object in the world, which would be a saving checkpoint or something like that. But we're doing this just so that we manually can control when our load and when our save is happening. So the first thing that we wanted to do is, let's say that our F is going to be our save game initializer. In the instance of wanting to save something, you can have two different situations. You can either have that you have never saved before, at which point you don't have a save game, or you can have a situation where you have saved before and you have a save game available. Now to handle both of these different situations we need to make some considerations. Before we do that, we are going to do something just to make things a little bit easier for ourselves, make it a little bit more clear. We're going to go back into the content browser and we're going to right click and we're going to click on the blueprint sub category here and choose an enumerator. We're going to name it E underscore for enumerator and save game slots. Let's capitalize that a little bit, just a little bit, so it's a little bit easier to see what it says. So save game slots. Let's open that up and let's make 3 different rows here. Let's call the first one save game slot 1 and the second one save game slot 2 and the third one, unsurprisingly, save game slot 3. Now the reason we created this is so that we have something that is consistent and we can't make mistakes. Because when you're handling save games in Unreal Engine, normally you use a string to identify which save game slot you're using. So if we were to right click here, for example, and say save game, then you'll see we have a bunch of things that appear here. And of these, the one that we want to use for now is does save game exist? And we hook it up to our F key here now. You can see that it's asking for a slot name and a user index. Now, our slot name here is a unique identifier that I spoke of. So we want this one to be consistent throughout so that the information isn't mistyped at some point. If we were to have a name here and we were to type in my save game, and then later on we are to load a certain game and we typed in my save game with a small g, for example, this is going to be capitalization sensitive, so it's going to be upper and lowercase sensitive, so it's going to be able to make a distinction between my save game like this and my save game with a G that's capitalized, meaning that it would not find the game file that we're looking for. This is the reason why we're using the enumerator. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to create a variable and we're going to call this our save game names. Hold on, I managed to misclick a little bit. Save game names, or we can type it as save game slots, I guess. And we'll make this of the type of E save game slots that we made earlier. So this means that we have available to ourselves here only a few, let's call it slots, this is a singular one. So we have available to us here only the options that we created in the enumerator, right? So that means that those are the 3 options we have here. So save game slot here, for example, if we drag it out like so, and we type to string, and we get the one that says it's user-friendly name. That means it will do a proper conversion to string. And we hook that up as our slot name. That means that we can use this later on to get the exactly same slot without having the problems of mistyping. Now we have done the first step. We have determined if there is a slot. Now we need to react to this. So we see we get a boolean out here. So we click B for branch and we get a branch out like so. And we'll just drag in a result in here. So this says that if we have a save game, then we need to use that save game. If we do not have a save game, we need to create a save game. So that's why we made these different events here. So on the false here, we don't have a save game, so we're gonna call the create save game. There we go. And we're gonna leave the true blank for now. So let's go to our event called create save game. And from here, what we're going to be doing is we're going to call something called we're gonna call something called create save game object. Now this is gonna take a class, and the class that it wants is the one that we created earlier called BP save game. And that means it's going to try and create that game object here. Now the object that it's going to be returning is going to be the same game, the reference to our game object here. So our player position is going to be this one, and this is the position that we want to save, right? But we want to streamline this a little bit. So what we know that, or what we want to do is, when we have done this, we have a reference to our save game object, so we want to store that. So we gave save game slot, let's call it. Now that name is taken, of course. Save game reference is a better name. And we want to make this of the type save game. Now, you can make it of the save game. This is inheritance, so if you use save game, you can use this for different save games, but for our purposes, it will be fine to just use the actual class that we created. Like so. So that means that we have created a save game and we're storing this variant or this reference for us to use later. That's all that's going to be doing for now. Then moving on. Now that we have done that, let's go back to where we were here. So by pressing F, we want to save. We either have the situation where we don't have a save created yet, and then we create a save game, or we have our game created already and we can use that. The way we use that is by loading that game save that already exists. So we have an event here called load save game. So we'll just call that load save game, like so. Now we have the prerequisites done here, so let's go down to load save game. Load save game is going to be very similar to create save game. There's something called load game from slots. There you go. And it's going to be using a slot name just like before, so we'll just be taking our enumerator and to string. Make sure that we have the identical spelling of our slot that we're after. And then we're going to be setting our save game reference here as well. So now, regardless of, right, also, good point to notice. When you're loading from a slot, you see you're getting a save game object reference. When we created a save game object here, we defined which class that we're getting, so our output here is a BP save game object, a BP save game object. This is just a save game object. This is the parent, which means we need to cast this first to our BP save game to make sure that we have the right type. And then we can set this reference like so. So now, regardless of which state we had up here when we pressed F, either we have the save or we don't have the save. If we don't have the save, we create it. If we do have a save, we load it. Now at that point, we have created this save game reference for both cases, which means we can now streamline these and make sure that they merge to the same code. So to do that, we call a function or a node called save game to slot, not surprisingly. And this is what we're going to be using. However, we made an event down here for saving the game. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to type in save game, call that function from both of these executions, because they are both going to be using the save game at this point, and they will be both at the same state with having a reference available. So what we can do when we are at the save game here, we say we want to save game to slot, and the same game object is the reference that we have saved either when we created or when we loaded, and the save game slot that we're going to be using is the enumerator to string, so we don't get a typographical error. Then we hook that up like so, and that is all done, and then it will save the game and then showing if it succeeded or not here. But we're gonna be assuming that it succeeded for now. Compiling and saving. Now we should have everything in place to be able to save our information, but now we need an ability to load this information as well. So what we do is we go to our key, which will be representing our loading function being executed, and we'll just say from this load save game is what we call it, and call that function. Now we know that we're going to be saving a position, and that position we have available in our save game class. So when we save our actual game over here, we need to make sure that it actually has the information set before we do the save, and when we load the game we need to make sure that we're reading out that information and acting upon it. So let's start with the saving. So the save game reference, set player position, like so, and then we'll move it a bit away so we get some more space down here, like so. Okay, so we are setting the position now, and the position should reasonably be wherever we are in the map, right? So let's do that. We get ourselves, since we're currently in the save game character, we can just do a get actor location, and it'll get the location for ourselves currently, like so. So now we have set the position in here, and then after that we're saving it to slot, so making sure that this information is saved. But when we're loading the information, we also want to make sure that our character's position is being loaded here as well. So we have the reference over here, so we get the player position, and we set actor location, and the target is self, of course, here as well, like so. So let's reflect upon this a little bit now then. So what's going to happen is we're at some point going to press F to save. We're going to check, does the save game exist? If no, then we create a save game and we set a reference to the save game that we created. If we had the save game, we're going to load an existing save game from here, and we're going to set the reference, and we're going to make sure that we teleport to that position with the character. Then after that we're going to save the information down so that it's available later. Then at any point later when we start the game, we're going to call the load save game, which is going to run through this code and get the save game, make sure that we're put in this position. So let's try this out and see how it works. So we have our character here, and actually let's make sure that I remember my keys. F for save, R for load. Okay. So running around here, I'm putting myself over here, I'm pressing F, and I'm moving away, and I'm pressing R, and you can see that I get teleported. So it works within the scope of the same session, right? So let's exit out, and let's start the game again, and let's press R, and you see that we get teleported to our position that we were at before when we pressed the save. Now we can make this a little bit more clear by doing things like maybe putting a print here, just for visibility's sake for us now here. So whenever we load the game, we want to say game loaded. And whenever we save the game, we want to print a string that says game saved, like so. And let's jump in again. So I run around, I press F, you can see game saved, game loaded. Why is that? Well, that's a little bit about the code that we have currently done. Because when we're pressing F, we do the save game, and it says the game exists, I want to load my game, which means it runs over here and says, well, that means that I should get all of this information and set the actor here and print this string out. And this works fine if we're going to start from scratch like this and just go like in the beginning. But in our case we have a little bit of a special situation because we have load game or load save game being called from two different places, either from when we save or from when we load, right? Because these do different events. So what we could do here is we could add a parameter saying, is this a actual load? And have that parameter determine if we should be doing the actual set actor location and the print string. So we add a branch, like so. And we make sure that this information is a little bit more pulled out. And this boolean should be the driver for that branch, like so. That looks better. So if we call load save game with an actual load, meaning we're actually trying to load it, then we should be setting our actor and we should be saying game loaded. Otherwise we should not. That means that it should be true for when we're pressing the load button, and it should not be true when we're actually doing it from the save game. So let's try that out. So I'm pressing R, I get teleported over here, press R, I get teleported. Now I press F for saving. It says only game saved and it doesn't teleport me anymore. I can place myself wherever I want. Then I can load again and I get teleported. So like you see, this is only going to be, let's demonstrate this. If I go over here and I press F for save, and then I go and do this, I run over here 90 degrees to left and I press load, you can see that I'm being repositioned to where I was, but I don't have the rotation that I had before. I kept the rotation I actually had when I was over here. And this is a consequence of what we're actually doing, because we decided that the only thing we wanted to save in this instance was the position, not the rotation of the player, which means that when we're actually setting the location of the player, the rotation is being kept from whatever we had before. So this is to demonstrate that you need to be mindful about what information you want to keep. Now, if this was something to be triggered, for example, directly from a menu or something like that, and you press immediately, then your rotation wouldn't matter because you wouldn't have it available, because you're not in the game, right? But this is something to keep in mind for you when you're creating a system like this, that you keep track of the variables that are important to you and that you work with them accordingly. So yeah, hopefully I've been detailed enough about how this works and this has been easy enough to follow along. That's all for now, I think. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you liked the video, leave a like. If you did not like it, leave a dislike. Leave any suggestions or comments you have down below. Subscribe and share this video if you want to see more like it in the future. In the next video, we will be learning a little bit about basic AI. That is all for now. Keep on learning.